We have heard from some absolutely brilliant speakers, a really diverse array of ideas, insights, etc. And just to help us kickstart the panel session, because you'll note that at the end of all of our sessions, we invite our speakers to turn their cameras back on again and engage with one another in a bit of chat. But also, we've typically got an invited speaker as well to slip into the mix. So I'm really, really glad to welcome the wonderful Marit. Now, Marit, I don't know if you want to come off mute and quickly introduce yourself. And then perhaps, I know you've been sitting there thinking about lots of different ideas and things that have maybe sparked some ideas in your head. But Marit, if you want to introduce yourself first and then share some of the aha moments that you've had this morning.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, great to be here. Great talks. My name is Marit Van Zalinge. I'm a geologist background, have a geologist background too. Had a taste of the mining industry doing my PhD with BHP Billiton, was sponsored by BHP Billiton. But afterwards, didn't go into the industry, didn't really stay in academia, but really moved into education. And that's where I really realized that there is a lot of work to do based on my own experience in my PhD, but also based on my experience teaching a lot of students which are not per se having a science background. I really started thinking, what are the skills that make a geologist great and unique? But I also realized, what are the skills that are missing? And looking at the talks, I definitely lack some important skills, which I think would have been great to have. And I loved the talks. I loved the experience Rowan shared, saying, yeah, the geologist repertoire is changing, industry is evolving, so the geologist role is also evolving. And I loved Jon Russil saying as well, yes, I think students coming out of their degree should have a good understanding of the importance of ESG. And I think it is so true. So what I try to do here is to learn a lot and mine all your information, your experience, because I think there is a real potential to create some great education material. And I don't want to be naive and think I'm going to rechange the entire academic system and universities, because I know how much it changed to time it takes to change a whole curriculum and a whole course. But I'm really looking to create 2-3 hour activities where students really can get an experience of what it is out there, really seeing how important it is to have ESG. And I'm mainly thinking now about geology students, but I think it can be a really wide scale. And I think a great example I use a lot in my teaching is role play. Why don't we create a whole scenario where there are different stakeholders and students need to play different stakeholders? Because I think then we come back to what Ludovine said, and was also quoted again this morning by Ruth Allington, saying stakeholders realizing they never belong to a single group is so important. And I think when you already start doing that already at university scale, is super crucial. And then, of course, when you have role play activities, we can also include what Ruth Allington was talking about today and Ian Stewart was talking about yesterday, really about developing skills such as effective dialogue, deep listening. And I love that Ruth said, these skills don't make me a worse geologist. Actually, they make my technical and geology skills more effective. So what I want to do, if you have great scenarios, if you think, oh, I had this scenario in the field, this would make a great case study, please contact me, because I would love to work with you and see if we can actually make really cool different modules that we can just slot into existing curriculum, or student groups can work on together if universities don't want to use. There's so many student chapters over the world. But also if you have other ideas than role play, let me know. I would love to hear what you think. Oh, this is really a good experience-based activity that students can do and would help to maybe let them go into industry a bit more effectively. So yeah, thank you for all your wisdom, and it's been very great to be here. Thank you, Sarah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Marit. And I'm really glad that this has been useful for you this morning. Now, Ruth Allington, your name has been mentioned in vain quite a lot just now by Marit, because I know that you also very much enjoy using that role play approach, etc. Do you have any suggestions or ideas for Marit on what she might be able to do here? And then perhaps I'll pass across to Murray, because I suspect he might have some ideas as well.
Yeah, I think particularly inspired by listening to Rowan, and I loved seeing the pictures and hearing the story behind the pictures. My favourite picture that Rowan showed was him sitting with the two guys drinking mugs of presumably tea. I don't know what was in the mugs. It might have been beer for all I know, but clearly having made, in all the pictures, but in that one especially, having made this essential human connection. Having made that connection, it brings geologists a whole new dimension to their working life, and B, it enables us to start communicating, to start exchanging information, and working collaboratively on how we're going to go forward. So I would think that a case study that was rooted in and also in what Jon Russil was telling us, was rooted in the very earliest parts of that, being in a new community, approaching a new community. How do you go about it? And testing out how we have those conversations, testing out what works and what doesn't work. There's a brilliant exercise you can do about listening, where you get into pairs, and the first instruction is that somebody's the speaker and somebody's the listener. The speaker is instructed to speak for 1 minute on some subject or other that's important to them, but not sort of massively traumatic. And the listener is instructed to not really pay attention, just to be there and look around. And almost nobody that I've experienced doing this, myself included, can go on for a whole minute without any sort of interaction, so speaking into the void. And then you do it again, and this time the listener is instructed to look at the speaker and maybe to nod a bit, but to say nothing. And then the third time, the listener, when the speaker has come to a natural pause, the listener says, "So what I heard you say was X, Y, Z." And then a conversation starts, even if the listener has really not achieved the message. So little exercises like that. And I'm sure, Marit, you're going to be very excited to hear what Maria Arpa has to say, because she's my teacher and inspiration in all of this kind of stuff. So but yeah, I think developing an overall scenario and having little role plays and discussions would be absolutely fantastic. And just on this call, we've got so much experience between us of real situations.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ruth. So what I heard you say there was, see, I'm learning, but I now actually need to try and summarize what I actually heard you say, was that absolutely, yes, Marit, this sounds like a really good idea. There are a multitude of different tools and techniques that are out there, including ones about how to really listen to somebody, like truly listen, and that two-way exchange of information as well. But Murray, I promised I was going to come to you next. Murray, how about some ideas from your end? And then I know, Andy, you've actually posted a really useful link into the chat, so I'll come to you next.
So thank you. And Ruth, I'm going to steal some of your ideas and use them in future. One of the things I've done in my career with different groups, I did it when I was with Chevron with our geologists, and I certainly did it USGS with our scientists there when I was associate director, and I'm doing it now with ICRAG, is especially at USGS and as an academic, I have all my students and all the researchers I work with require them to be able to tell me in 30 seconds why the taxpayers are giving them money to do what they're doing. So, you know, someone's funding you with a lot of money to do something. So in 30 seconds, I call it the elevator speech, you know, so who cares, right? And I developed this when I was in Washington, I guess, because literally, Ruth, you know, you're saying you're talking to somebody, and often with a politician, you have 30 seconds, and often the face is blank, right? And so, you know, this is your chance, and if you blow it, you blow it. So it's a really important skill. Taking it further today, the important thing would be, so my original training was an anthropologist before geology, and doing this then in different cultures becomes really important. And what Rowan showed is, you know, you have to learn where you are and what's happening and be able to figure out how to talk, the language, and what to talk about. So it becomes infinitely more complex once we, you know, move beyond our normal culture.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Murray. And who knew you started off in anthropology? That is truly brilliant. That's great. Andy, I'll come to you just in a second, but also to point out that into the chat, our Samsung attendee. So Samsung, my sincere apologies. If your name is Samsung, that's brilliant. If that's the device that you're on, that is also fantastic. But that computer game built around climate change, if you can find the link, that would be really exciting, because again, one of the purposes of this conference is to try and share as many of these ideas and links as possible, so that we can all make use of them as and when is appropriate. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Samsung. You have found it. So Andy, maybe let's come to yourself and just ask for any insights from your end, and then perhaps we can go to Jon.
Sure. Well, I gave the link to the game, and basically we developed, or Prima Mohideen, an educationist, developed the game really more for school-age students, but we've used it at universities, we've used it in community, and basically it's the idea of understanding where the minerals in a phone come from, and the phone being such a good idea because everyone has one, and particularly for school-age children, that's pretty much their central part of their life. So getting them to think about, you know, where it comes from, what happens to it, and it's very much an open style role play where you're just trying to ask through questions as well as go around the board. So I definitely recommend people to look at it. The other thing, and in some ways it's almost a reply back to that question from Murray, we were kind of having a little side chat as well. I was saying that one of the projects I'm working on through other people is basically working with indigenous communities who have the right to free, prior, informed consent, but very often don't. Consent normally allows them to have their own decision-making process. A lot of the time the decision-making process isn't clear. So we've actually been working with communities to kind of put up their capacity before they meet mining companies, so they have clarity in how they deal with them. I think that's been a really interesting learning experience. And oddly enough, approaching it from that side and saying, if you're a community, you know, how do you kind of think through your process? I think that would be an interesting way of looking at it as well.
Yeah, and I guess as well, it almost forces you to have more empathy, because you're actually having to put yourself in the shoes and socks of those different stakeholders, those different people who are within that ecosystem. Would that be correct, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. And trying to, I mean, clearly you can think through to an extent, but trying to actually, you know, very much live through an experience of decision making, which is very often rooted in the culture, as what anthropologists should know. So trying to understand that and work from that viewpoint, and it also down to communication as well. You know, again, how people communicate, which again is so culturally based, and I think, you know, it really helps consider all of those issues as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andy. And thank you as well, Lorraine, who is the Samsung, posting all of those fantastic links in chat. That is truly fantastic. Jon, how about yourself? What about some insights from your end? And of course, building on that brilliant decision tree that you showed us and that came out of the InFact work. And then perhaps we can go to Victor.
Yeah, I think I'd like to go back onto the educational side of things, actually, because I you know, as Rowan demonstrated, and so many of us have mentioned, these are skills that geologists need to have, and I think that it would be quite an easy thing to integrate into a course as a module, you know, maybe for final year students, for example, and I've been really inspired by a lot of people that I've worked with in this area, and they're all really passionate about wanting this to happen and wanting to get it right. And I think there's there's no shortage of people that are willing to step in and provide this sort of additional educational content. And you know, in the last couple of years during this pandemic as well, we've even developed some really good platforms to be able to deliver this sort of thing remotely, including online role-playing scenarios, actually, which I'll write to you about, Marit. But yeah, I do think it's key. I think there is really an appetite for it in universities. They're struggling as well with funding cuts. You know, with the importance of earth science education in universities is being diminished at the moment. There's old standing courses that are being shut down. It's really sad to see. But at the same time, there's oops, my cat. There's some other universities which are really getting on board with this. St Andrews, for example, they've just started a new Masters on Responsible Resource Management, which is brilliant, and that needs to happen. It needs to happen quickly.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, Jon. And I think that's something where quite a lot of us sitting around this panel, I know we all lecture at different universities and bring that experience into those universities, be it, so Rose is at the University of Leicester, I lecture at Imperial College, etc. as well. And I think all of us try and bring in that responsibility aspect into the natural resources world. But there are, of course, lots of other forums as well, so like Geology for Global Development, as well as another avenue that can really help with this. And I know that I'm missing out on loads of them. Victor, let's come to yourself, because I know you've also got lots of ideas on this front. And then perhaps let's go to Ruth Apps, coming at this from, again, slightly different angle, because I'm acutely aware there are quite a lot of geologists sitting around the table, and you don't have to be a geologist in this world, just to make that really clear. But to speak to a geologist, Victor.
Thank you, Sarah. In fact, I want to share something that I learned when I was serving at European Federation of Geologists, and it links to what Murray just said with communication to policymakers or to politicians, and also what the approach Ruth normally uses of listening. And I remember that we were trying to get the attention of politicians, and then we realized that having this, they have a very short span of attention. So if you don't have these 30 seconds or 1 minute, and then they go blank and they just go away. But even if they provide you some attention, you also have the risk of them thinking that they don't really need us, because they have advisors and they can get a report tailor-made in, let's say, 2 days or 3 days. So what I learned is that instead of trying to push our ideas forward, we could simply ask them what are they planning to do, so what is their agenda, and how can we support them. And suddenly they start paying attention, because they want to leverage, they want to get some results, they want to get some inputs, and then you start getting their attention and start and engaging in let's say a sort of dialogue. Of course, in that dialogue, you also need to be aware that the language that you need to use needs to be very simple, because many policymakers know it's just simple because they are not educated, let's say, in
I'm going to call it,
because many of them, they are lawyers or economists, so they're the 7th grade, so it's like talking to a 13 years old. Thanks.
Fantastic, Victor. You did go a little bit cyborg-esque, but I think this is just par for the course in terms of communication in this age of video conferencing. So thank you for that. And all of us were listening very, very hard, and totally agree with what you were saying. So thanks, Victor. Ruth Apps, how about yourself? I mean, in terms of kind of getting that message across, but also, of course, listening to what somebody really needs. I mean, when you are building a company, you're constantly having to listen to what somebody truly needs and what's that pain point that you're solving. Would that be correct, or would you counteract that?
No, that is definitely correct. I'm going to caveat this. I did study geology at university, I never went and worked as a geologist. So it's all like I went into the electricity sector, which actually is got a lot of similarities. A part of what I worked on is in the UK, if you don't know how the UK they get paid in network operators, is they have this structure called RIO, and one of those is called incentives, and one of those incentives is stakeholder management. They're really, Ofgem's really keen to make sure that those electricity networks are engaging in the right way with their key all their stakeholders. And so that's sort of carried through to what I do now, but it is so much about listening, and it's about understanding all the different groups, and also bringing them in when you need to bring them in, because sometimes if a group stays too isolated and then you go and talk to them, they feel a bit hostile. They're like, why have I been left out of this conversation? Why are you now speaking to me? That's especially with local communities. But if you engage them early on, then I think it makes them feel welcomed and involved, and then they can sort of follow. And that, I think, is really important. But it's always lovely when I get a call on the office going, we talked about you in the pub last night, and is this going to happen? And is this going to explode? And then you just have to it's great. Just having those sort of conversations is just brilliant. Or the people who find shafts in their back garden. I now know it's Murray to blame for that. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Murray's drill holes were necessarily 3 meters wide and 300 meters deep, all of them, were they, Murray? But that then comes back to our mini version again, Ruth. But we'll be talking about that one later. Fantastic, thank you. And Rowan, how about yourself? I mean, like, absolutely phenomenal experience in Liberia, and thank you so much for sharing those stories. I'm sure you've got ideas as well in terms of sharing and teaching and learning with one another.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, as you said before, and as Jon alluded to, the investment and financing of STEM degrees in university now is being cut back a little, and I'm fully aware that in CSM they've had issues with their mining engineering degree that's being rolled back at the moment. So I think, in a sense, that it's almost up to the geologists that are currently in the industry that are willing to plug this gap, in a sense, whereby we should take our experience and what we've learned and what we do to the universities as well, rather than wait for them to reach out to us. We obviously need to engage throughout the whole spectrum. Social media obviously is a very powerful tool now, and what we've done today is also very useful. But we just need to be very public and engaging with what we do. We've got to be proactive. I think the industry years ago was kind of just a closed industry, the mining exploration industry. But now our awareness of the need to undertake sustainable mining and exploration is really there. I mean, I can't remember when I was at university talking about ESG and sustainable mining and all that. That didn't happen. And I'm not that old yet. I'm only so old, I'm not going to say, but that was only a couple of years ago, 8 years ago, when I left university, and I can't recall talking about ESG. So we need to take our experience in the industry now back to universities, feed in. We can't expect academia to do everything. There are budgets. Lecturers and academics obviously have obligations in university, but we are becoming much more proactive now in our approach with science communication and what we do. And I think that's the way forward now, is to complement academia and obviously use social media to feed in to society, because it's obviously all well and good having geologists talking to each other, but obviously we need to talk to the people that are outside the industry, and that's one thing this conference is obviously aiming to do. And I'm sure there are ways, workshops, engaging with different bodies, environmental groups as well, to engage with them and offer our perspective, offer to approach them, because obviously historically we've always been seen as the ones trying to hide behind the industry and not be very open. So now maybe we need to reverse the roles and go into other organizations and be open about it. I think that's the way to go, certainly.
No, I think that's brilliant, Rowan. And actually, the point I just took away from what you just said now is that we need to be able to complement one another.
Yeah, certainly.
Not to be to complement rather than conflict in a way. So actually seeing, okay, how can we build things together? Obviously call one another out. There's a lot of C's here. Call one another out if we think that something is wrong or could be improved. But there's that, and that then goes into some more C's. So collaboration with one another, and then that word or that phrase that I think Ian set us off with yesterday, that co-creation. So building all of that together and moving forwards. So I think this is something here where, by the way, it was totally unintentional to have so many geologists in on the same call, just so that I can see just how badly we set up this morning session. Wave if you have a geology or geoscience somewhere in your background. Excellent. Don't worry, Andy and Ludovine, you are wonderful, wonderful people. If you want to know more about the rocks, we'd be very happy to have those discussions, be it in the pub or outside of the pub. Yes, don't worry, Ludovine, you are not totally alone. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of this, what we've got for this morning, I think we've heard a huge array of fantastic tools, tips, techniques as to how do we make ESG a reality within raw materials. Yes, we've gone into quite a lot of depth in terms of, say, exploration and the geological side of mining. But of course, there are many other aspects when it comes to not just the mining or the extraction of those materials out of the ground, but the processing of them, the selling of them. We heard from Hugo Brody at the beginning of today about the London Metal Exchange. So one of those primary forums where people buy and sell these commodities, and actually what the LME is bringing in terms of almost those ESG requirements just to be a part of that exchange. And that's something that has developed hugely over the last 12 months. This time a year ago, we heard from Hugo, and it's really interesting to see how much things have advanced over the last 12 months, despite COVID-19 and lockdown and everything. Really good improvements have been made there, which is exciting to see. We then heard obviously from Victor, and Victor described the difference between hard power and soft power. And I think, Victor, you were mentioning it in the chat afterwards, just to try and clarify. At the end of the day, the soft power is the one that we're wanting to go for because that's more in line with ESG. Is that correct, Victor? Have I misinterpreted you?
Correct. The point is that if you are in a hard power framework, the ESGs won't be kept. So it will be all about soft power, hopefully.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, just to make sure we have clarification on that one there, Victor, which is brilliant. Then, of course, we had the fantastic Ruth Allington. And I think through Ruth's talk, we get a whole load of kind of tips as to how do you truly listen to somebody, and also that mediation process, because people are always going to have different perspectives. And I think that concept, Ruth, for me, of that somebody feeling powerless versus, okay, I maybe don't fully trust you, but at least I feel heard, and that shift in terms of someone's personal being, and that certainly really resonated with me. There's a whole lot of other stuff to obviously take away from your talk, but I think those are some of the key things that really resonated with me, which was great. Then into Andy's amazing synthesis of 70 pages into 10 minutes. So I really encourage everybody to go and take a look at the London Mining Network's report online with those fabulous graphics that you've got there, Andy, as well, that I think it's probably, again, me being a geologist, I just like pictures. So things like that really resonating with me. And perhaps as well, from somebody who, I mean, I've spent most of my life working within the mining sector, actually saying, okay, well, no, what are the different perspectives around it as well? So thank you very, very much for bringing all of that into the room. That was brilliant. Then from Andy, we went across to Murray, and we got the world's most brilliant synthesis of a case study of a fantastic mine in Ireland, Lachine. So I encourage anybody who wants to see a case study of how do you find and then begin to go into those early stages, etc., of that mine, and go and take another look at Murray's talk, because especially the slides was full. They were absolutely packed with information that was really exciting there. So thank you very much for that, Murray. Then into Jon, who gave us the rundown on the decision-making tree for exploration within a mining project. And so thank you very much, Jon. And that synthesis, really, I guess, of one of the outputs that came from the European-funded INFACT project, of course, as well, bringing in all of that expertise from SRK. So thank you, Jon, for that. Then we were transported to Liberia. and the wonderful world of Rowan. And we're not going to ask you what was in those mugs, Rowan, but it looked like you were certainly having a brilliant time, really interacting and getting to know and building trust with the local community as well. So thank you so much for all of those insights. And then, of course, into Ruth Apps, and the fact that lots of us now have scribbled diagrams, generated, well, basically dredging up all of our school-based physics, etc., around gravity and what kind of weights we need, etc. So, Ruth, I think if you haven't already been bombarded with people saying, "Oh, I know of a mine shaft," or something like that, then you will be in the near future. And then finally, of course, the wonderful Marit, who started us off on this great discussion within our closing panel here today. And Marit, hopefully we've given you some ideas that perhaps can be taken forwards. So thank you very, very much for that, and good luck with putting together those teaching products in the near future. So just before we let you all go, and I realize I'm just a minute over, but just to advertise this afternoon session, because this afternoon session starts off with the wonderful Lucy Crane and Ben Lepley, who are going to be talking about public perception of mines, etc. And so their talk begins to leverage wonderfully off the back of what we've just been speaking here, okay? We're also going to be hearing from Nick Copeland, who's going to be talking about different tools and techniques for looking at social and security within the mining space. We're going to be hearing from a wealth of other individuals, and you can see all of their names up on the website, finishing off with, and I know that Jon is going to be featuring again this afternoon. So in terms of taking different stakeholder roles, a bit of role play, Catherine McCallum is going to lead us in a bit of role play around, okay, what does all this mean for an exploration geologist when we're thinking about the triple bottom line? How do we actually make this a reality? What sort of conversations should we be having? And then Rich Lloyd is going to help us with our panel later on this evening when we draw it all to a close. So ladies and gents, please put your hands together to say a massive thank you for our wonderful panel of experts and speakers for this morning. It has been truly wonderful. So thank you very much to all of you.